So right now we're down to the primary objectives, and the primary objectives would be, the first one would be in red, and that is, was Tibet independent of China during the Ming Dynasty? And we'll look at the first topic in red, and that's, how do the Chinese classify Tibet? Okay, and then was Tibet considered as part of China by the Chinese authorities, themselves? So let me repeat the question once more and make sure that everybody understands what I'm trying to say. My question is this. By the self-declaration criterion, in other words, by the criterion of the Chinese calling the Tibet something, okay, how did the PRC claim that Tibet was classified by the Ming region? In other words, we're talking about, let me repeat, okay, this is a little bit confusing. We're asking, was Tibet considered as part of China during the Ming Dynasty? According to whom? According to, number one, the PRC, and number two, according to the Qing Dynasty, and number three, according to the Ming Dynasty. Everybody understands what I'm saying? Let me repeat. Okay, my question is this. Was Tibet part of China? According to whom? According to the PRC. And then according to the Qing Dynasty. And then according to the Ming Dynasty. Do they agree with each other? In other words, the Ming version, the Qing version, and the PRC version, do they agree with each other, or are they consistent? Everybody understands my question right now? Okay, now see, okay, so this is the PRC version. The most authoritative statement of the PRC's position is given by the Historical Atlas of China, and this is the 8-volume thing, which is a compilation of which was proposed by Chairman Mao Zedong, okay, and was commissioned by the PRC's Academy of Social Sciences. This is the statement, official, okay, and if you look at Baidu, so that's the reason why I say I'm going to use Baidu, because this reflects the PRC's position, and this is what the Chinese people in mainland China, that's what they get to read. They go to the computer, they search, they don't get Wikipedia, they get Baidu, and that's what Baidu says. And that is the chief editor, Hon-Shiang, is one of the leading blah, 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 blah. You can see that, okay? In other words, basically, it's like it's God, okay? The Historical Atlas received the Special Great Award, is hailed as one of the 2 foundation-laying achievements in the field of history. It's the most important achievement in Chinese historical geography. Hon-Shiang is a serious and meticulous scholar, blah, 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 and so forth, okay? So, I mean, this is the reference. And again, as I've said, it was commissioned by Chairman Mao. So that is the PRC's position. And that is, indeed, Tibet was part of Ming China, okay? This map is the map for the Ming Dynasty as claimed by the PRC, okay? So this is a map of China and Ming Dynasty in a book, the most authoritative book published by the PRC. And this is the PRC's position, and that is the white colored stuff, that's not China. All the colored area was part of China, okay? However, so Xinjiang part, the Mongolian part, was part of China, but not part of the Ming Empire. It was not, okay? The Ming Empire is the yellow part. The yellow contiguous part is the Ming Empire. So according to the PRC, this was not part of Ming Empire. This was not part of Ming Empire, but this is part of the Ming Empire. Tibet was very clearly part of the Ming Empire. That's a very clear statement. Any question? Incidentally, if you look at the book, it says over here that I've said actually it doesn't give any source. The PRC probably figures that there's no need to give the source, because if it's by authority of Mao Zedong and the PRC, you know, you simply take it as it is, okay? So, remember, we're going to look at the other 2 versions, and there's the next version is the Ming history. Remember I said about the official history? Okay, remember? Official history, we are only looking at 2 official histories. The official history for the Ming Dynasty, which is called the Ming history. And then, of course, Ming history, if you look at Baidu again, you can see it's one of China's official history. It consists of 332 scrolls. Please remember this number, okay? I've used this number several times later on. So remember, there are 32 scrolls. It's a big set of records. Okay, covered. And so I think over here we are not going to go into details, but basically what I'm telling you is that you can just, now if you have an iPad or whatever, you can go to internet and you can look at from different sources, okay, the whole book for free. There are websites that are based in mainland China, in Taiwan, and Hong Kong, or even in the United States that will give you this book for free. Okay, so you can check it out easily. Okay, so this is just an website from the screen from one of the websites, which is called archive.org, that gives you a lot of these texts. Okay, in its originality, in its original form, in the photographic image. Okay, so nothing can be fake. So for those of you who can read Chinese, again, I invite you to correct me if I'm wrong. You can see that this is a table of content. The table of contents itself has 2 volumes, by the way. Okay? It's a huge book, by the way. This is Yunnan, and in Yunnan, it says very clearly that Burma is part of Yunnan, okay? Laos is part of Yunnan, and this area is the Chiang Mai area of northern Thailand, okay? So it's stated very clearly in the Chinese Ming history official. Now, that's what they claim. Whether you agree with it is a separate issue. I'm not giving any judgment on that, but what I'm telling you is that that's what the Chinese Ming history document claims. Okay, Burma, Laos, and okay, the and then over here you have foreign countries. The red circle, that is by the time you get to scroll 320. We have foreign countries, and then we have Korea and so forth, Japan and so forth. And this is, by this time, it is scroll 320. Remember how many scrolls are that altogether? 332, okay? So, okay. And then over here, down here, by this time, please look at the scroll number. This is 331. And that's where you have the Wu Si Zhang, which is Yu Zhang, Da Bao Fa Wang, Grand Precious Religious King, which is actually the Karmapa, the 4th. Okay, actually. Okay. Well, actually, it is the 4th and the 5th and the 6th and the 7th and so forth. Okay, and then there are a whole bunch of religious kings and spiritual kings. Okay, that have received their appointments. Okay, according to the PLC. This is one of the major justification of PLC. Okay, the PLC teaches school children that even according to our official history, the Ming history, it was clear that Tibet was part of the Ming Empire because the Ming Empire appointed a commanding officer in Yuzhang. Okay? And then, of course, there are other district officers that are appointed in other parts of the Tibetan region. So it's very, very clear recorded. Now, this is just a table of content, by the way. Okay? We don't have time to look at the text. I'm just showing the table of content. And so most Chinese students, okay, even university students who just believe in what the government, the teacher says is that, I mean, we have over here students, we have over here professors, okay. How many of you actually go and check the original sources, okay? Most people don't, okay. So, okay. Now, actually, if you go and check the original sources, you can actually, even without checking original sources, I'm really showing you the number over here. This is scroll 331. This is scroll 332. How many scrolls are there altogether? 332, okay? Well, this is the 2 last ones, okay? It's a little bit weird. Okay, actually, that's the reason why you need to understand, and that's the reason why I spent some time in going through the Chinese historiography. Because if you understand Chinese historiography, you understand that all these official histories through the dynasties, as I say, for the past 2,500 years, it follows a very strict format. This format was established in the Han Dynasty by the first official history, which is called Historical Records by Sima Qian. Okay, I mean this is a really, really, really very authoritative book in Chinese history. And since then, the format has been followed. And then, first of all, it will have the first part of the book. Okay, dealing with the annals is just basically the record of every month, every year what happened. And then after that, it will have the astronomic, meteorological, and other natural observations, disasters, okay, major earthquakes, and so forth to record those. And then after that, this is the most important part for our talk, okay? And that is in the earlier part of the book, okay? In this case, it's scroll number 40 to 46 out of a total of 332. It'll be the geography section. It records every region of what is considered as China by the Chinese government. Okay, so in this particular case, in Ming history, this is 7 scrolls devoted to it, and they're all together 300 pages. It gives you a detailed catalog of every place, and then for every place, it gives you the population figures, the taxation income, and a whole bunch of other things. Okay, famous scenic, popular scenic areas and stuff like that. Okay, and then the regions include Beijing, Nanjing, and then the 13, what they call the 布政使司, which basically are the provinces, and the provinces are, of course, named explicitly, blah, 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 blah. And that is how the Chinese territories are recorded. And then again, consistent with the what I showed you just now, remember in Yunnan, it says very clearly that Burma is under Yunnan and Laos, and then Northern Thailand is part of Yunnan. In other words, the Chinese are not being shy over here, okay? If they think that you belong to them, they will put it there, okay? I mean, they're very inclusive when it comes to things like that, okay? Well, for some reason, Tibet is never mentioned, okay? And then, of course, after that, you have a whole bunch of other things that are a lot more important to the empire, like the protocols, the structure of the bureaucracy, economy, taxation, all kinds of things that are worth recording. And then after that, you have, these are borderline, what you call territories. Okay, the borderline territories are the ones, that are actually controlled by the ethnic rulers that they don't consider themselves a part of China, but China considers them as part of China. Okay, so these are ethnic rulers, and then again, it's stated once more that the ethnic rulers in Burma and Laos and northern Thailand, they're over here. And then relegated to the last few scrolls, you have, first of all, the foreign countries. And the foreign countries, of course, include a whole bunch of countries, Japan, Vietnam, including Holland and Italy. Okay? And then after that, then you have the Western lands. And what I showed you, and which is what the PRC government doesn't tell the school children, is that what you see over here when you say, you have a commanding officer. Yeah, there was a commanding officer with the title of commanding officer. But a commanding officer is at the bottom. It is over here. It's over here, okay? After the foreign countries, okay? So they were actually classified as a foreign country. And obviously that title was just an honorific title. And we'll get into some details afterwards, okay? It's just an honorific title. Even the Chinese government at that time didn't consider those as part of China. So it doesn't even, these people, the Tibetan polities, not only didn't even deserve to be over here, they don't even qualify to be here. They're at the bottom over there, okay? And I'm going to, the next table will expand this, Western lands, okay? And Tibetan entities are in Western land number 3, which is next to the last scroll. And then so these are actually the polities that are listed in scroll 331. And then you have the whole bunch of, and it includes, among other, Nepal. It also includes this country, okay, which eventually all the Chinese authorities agree there is no such country, okay? It's a fake country, okay? Somebody just came in, imposters claiming themselves to be tributary envoys just to get presents from the emperor. So that's how it was treated, okay? And then, of course, in scroll 332, then you have other Western lands that are listed. Among them are Samarkand, which is in today's Uzbekistan, and then, of course, Medina and Mecca and Saudi Arabia. In other words, according to the Ming history, which is a Chinese official history, Tibet is in the same category as Samarkand and Saudi Arabia, and it's ranked below Holland and Italy. Okay? That's how it's treated. Again, I'm not saying who is right and who is wrong. I'm just presenting to you, that's what the records show. Okay? Now, you might then question me and say, look, remember, this is Ming history, right? Who wrote Ming history? Qing, right? So wait a minute, that's unfair, right? You're saying that the Qing people probably were just trying to discredit the Ming government because they might say, well, actually, or rather you might say, as a patriotic Chinese, you might say that, well, Ming actually had sovereignty or control over Tibet, but the Qing government because now they have the right to write the history. Remember, there's a famous saying, the victors write history, okay? Then they would want to discredit them, okay? So let's see what the Ming government says then, right? Because this is what the Qing government says in succeeding this heritage, 2,500 years history of heritage of official history. Okay, so this thing, which is called Unification Record, okay, since the 6th century, since the Tang Dynasty, again there's a tradition for the current Chinese government, current, not the succeeding dynasty anymore. We're talking about the current government compiling a detailed catalog of all the territories of the contemporaneous realm. Okay? So this is not like a next dynasty, it's contemporaneous at that time. So, as I say, the tradition started in the 6th century. Again, it was followed dynasty after dynasty. And then by the Ming, of course, then they do the same thing for their own. And then, of course, as you can see, this again is according to Baidu. Okay, I'm using the Baidu version, okay, of explaining the importance of this. See, the research that I'm doing in my book, I take great pains in documenting the importance of each book that I use. Because basically it's like, you quote a book, I quote a book, okay? Nowadays, any Tom, Dick, and Harry can publish a book or an article, okay? And so, why should I listen to you? Again, coming back to the same question, why should I listen to you? These books are recognized to be the most authoritative ones by the Chinese, regardless of whether it's a PRC or Taiwan or whatever the case may be. So again, you can see that it will follow the traditional rules of the great Yuan. Yuan is a preceding dynasty, okay? And Yuan follow, of course, again, in the case Tang and Song and the dynasty and so forth. And it was compiled several times, as you can see over here. But the first, because, well, the dynasty, the Ming dynasty, spanned over 267 years. And over 267 years of the territory changes. So they have to revise the catalog, okay? Just like in a company, we have to revise the inventory list, okay, once every month or so. So over here, we're going to look at the Tianxun edition first, okay? And you can see that the emperor personally wrote a preface and then granted this name of Great Ming Unification Record. And then later on, you have a revised edition, which we'll again take a brief look. So let's see what they say for their own territories, okay? So this is the table that I've constructed to give you a structure. You can see that there are 90 scrolls. Okay, you can see there are 90 scrolls. And incidentally, I don't know what's good, but I actually mail a copy of my PowerPoint slides to Chodon, to you, right? So, feel free to share it. I mean, so you don't have to take pictures. If you want a copy of my PowerPoint slides, okay, you can just ask her for it. Okay? So I'm sorry, I just didn't occur to me to offer that to see how all these cameras clicking. So again, you start out with your most important area, the capital cities, and then Shuntian would be it's the Hebei province, which is the area surrounding the capital city of Beijing. And then after that, they will, of course, usually start with Hebei, Henan, and then Shanxi, Shandong, and those are the provinces. And later on, they will go into the little bit more distant provinces like Shanxi, and then Yunnan. Okay, Yunnan usually is a little bit further. And then, of course, after that, again, this is stated once more. Okay, this is now a Ming document. Remember, it's not a Qing document; it's a Ming document. The Ming document says the same thing. Burma, in fact, over here, they are even more forceful than Ming history. Ming history that was compiled by the Qing dynasty listed those under ethnic rulers. But under the Ming document, they just tell you straight out directly that Burma and Laos, they were part of the Yunnan province. They don't even so stress out their ethnic rulers. They just say, well, they're under us, okay? And then after that, you have the most distant province, this. And then after that, actually the term Wai-Yi, again, correct me if I'm wrong, Wai-Yi literally means foreigners, right? You can't be more foreign than a foreigner, okay? So I've changed it to foreign aliens, which I'm not sure whether it's a more polite term. But scroll 89, foreigners, okay, Korea, Manchuria, Japan, and then Tibet is here. In other words, the Ming Emperor very clearly labeled the Tibetans as foreigners, okay, after Korea, after Japan, and of course, in that same group, okay, you have foreign aliens, part 1 and part 2, and in part 2, of course, you have altogether 57 other foreign entities, includes again places like Java and Thailand and Vietnam, and then of course Saudi Arabia and so forth. So it's very clear that the Ming government didn't consider Tibet as China. It's considered as a foreign entity. So this is the map. This is the modern map over here, and you can see that. You can see that over here. They started out by this area, and they go down to basically to Yunnan and Guizhou. Okay, these are the most distant provinces. Okay? Now, I want to point out one place, and I would like you to memorize it. And this area over here, okay, is called Xingshu Lake. Okay, and this will come up repeatedly. So please remember, position is in current Qinghai's position. Okay, this is Qinghai. This is of course Tibet. This is Qinghai, which of course the Tibetans would consider as Amdo or part of the Tibetan region. Okay, but the Chinese consider it as of course outside the area that is controlled by the Kashak region. Okay, and again, the details would be just too complicated for us to talk about today. But anyway, so please remember, okay, this is Xining, which is the capital city of Qinghai, which is sort of actually to the eastern end of Qinghai, and then this part over here is Xingshu Lake. Okay, the importance of which will become clear later on. Should I pause for what time should I pause? 5:30. Okay, 5 more minutes. Okay. So, okay, for those of you who can read Chinese, again, just again giving you, a photo image of the catalog. Okay, this is the photo image of the original Ming edition. Okay, this is a Ming book. Okay, printed during the Ming Dynasty, which is kept in the National Central Library, and it has 5,600 pages. So it's a very comprehensive catalog of all the areas of China. And then over here, that's northern Thailand. And then over here, in 1809, you have foreigners, and then you have Korea, and then you have Japan, and then you have Tibet over here, which is circle. And then in 90, you have Vietnam, you have Siam, which is Thailand, and then you have these places with Java and Malacca, and then a whole bunch of. This one is particularly interesting. This term, Foling, is used to refer to the area that corresponds to today's Turkey. In even older books, that term was used to refer to the Eastern Roman Empire. Okay? So those in the same category with Tibet, which are the foreigners. And then, of course, that's Mecca, and then that's Medina, Saudi Arabia. Okay. This is the imperial preface. Okay, Emperor Yingzong wrote the preface for this book, and it says blah 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 this, and I know most of you cannot read it, so the translation over here. Since ancient times, blah 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 blah, and so forth. Okay, we have a mandate to rule heaven and earth and the whole world, blah blah blah, and so forth. And then it says over here, our territory is truly vast. Okay, eastward it reaches the end of Liao. Westward, it reaches the sand dunes. Southward, it reaches the ocean. Lands in all directions throughout the world. They come to court to pay their respect. Okay? Just brag about it, okay? But seriously, okay? First of all, the sand dunes are over here. In Chinese terms, the sand dunes are over here. In other words, this preface states very clearly that our country is so large that our western end reaches here. So even in bragging, all he's saying is that it reaches here, which of course is it's about the eastern boundary of today's Tibet autonomous region. Okay, that's where the emperor is bragging, by the way. So that's the sand dunes. Okay, but let's see further. went on to say in his preface, remember, this is the imperial preface. The emperor is saying this, okay? As for governing within our own national boundaries, in other words, after you brag, okay, this is a very serious document. It's not for bragging, it's serious cataloging. So let's down to reality over here. As for governing within our own boundaries, they are the capital cities and the world, our Chinese world, the real Chinese world, which of course is relevant, is divided into 13 provinces, namely Shanxi, Shandong, blah, 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 blah. And again, Tibet is never mentioned, okay? And of course, also recorded that the aliens from all directions to whom we confer official titles. So that's an important part. Is that basically the emperor says, is that let's be serious about it, okay? The places where we actually govern are these, but these are places that we give our titles, okay? We give our titles to Japan and then to the Tibetans and there's a whole bunch of other people, okay? And so that's what it means. Okay. And then after the preface, there's this map. Now, you should have a copy of that map. Everybody should have a copy of that map, right? Okay, so if you look at this copy of the map, okay, it's in graphical form. Actually, remember, there are 5,600 pages to this book, and there's no way we can look at this 5,600 pages. So you don't have a copy. But you can look at that. You look at that. So this is the schematic map of the so-called world. Okay, and that is this 1461 edition. And again, what you see over here is this. This is the capital city. This is Nanjing. This is Sichuan. And this is Gansu. Okay? And in all these places, you can see there are black background, white lettering, and frame. This, of course, is a little bit clearer. Jingshi, okay, capital city. Black background, white lettering, frame. Okay? You look at, this is Korea. You look at this is Japan. Japan is white background, black lettering, not frame. Okay? The difference is very clear. Everybody sees that? And then you look at this. This is black lettering, white background, and frame. In other words, Tibet, the treatment, diagrammatically speaking, is exactly the same as Japan. It's the same as Vietnam, and it's just the opposite of the interior areas. In other words, the contrast is literally in black and white. It's very clear, okay, as to whether Tibet was considered as part of the Ming Empire by the Ming Emperor and by his governmental officials. So now it's 5:30. Maybe let me finish this part and then we can take a break. So the implications. The book that we have just looked at, it conforms to a centuries old, actually it's millennium old, okay? It's millenniums old tradition of the central government compiling a detailed record, a catalog of all the contemporaneous components of China's territory. It's commissioned directly by the Ming Emperor. It's jointly compiled and submitted to the Emperor by several dozens of senior court scholars. If you look at the book, and again, I said, this book can be downloaded for free from the internet. You can see that there are altogether 56 scholars with the names on it. Okay, each one put the name on it. I am one of the board, a member of the board of authors. Okay, at the beginning of the book, and then of course the emperor personally approves it and write a preface. And not only Tibet is excluded from the China section, it's labeled as a foreign entity and grouped with many other equally foreign entities. Okay, and then of course then we see the map over there where you have the black and white contrast. So it's difficult for me to imagine the more explicit and authoritative proof that the Tibet was not perceived as part of the Ming Empire. However, that doesn't mean that I have proven that Tibet was not part of the Ming Empire, because if you are patriotic Chinese, what you would argue is that, well, that's because the Ming Emperor and his office were just a bunch of separatists and splittists. Okay? I mean, they're just as bad as the Dalai Lama. So, I mean, they're just wrong. Okay? So you can conclude either way you want. All I do is just to present the historical documents, and then you can make the subjective interpretation yourself. Before I continue, let's have a break. Thank you very much. Thank you. Pan?
Are we taking questions?
Yeah. Any questions?
20 minutes.
Yeah. 20 minutes, good. Are there any questions? No questions?
Have you kind of changed the people's perceptions after giving this talk?
Chinese, have you changed the perception of other Chinese people? Have you convinced them, since you lecture to all kinds of Chinese from different backgrounds?
I never know, because no Chinese will tell me honestly. My guess is that these things, I mean, it's the same with you, it's the same with all of us. Something that you were taught. I mean, this could be religion, this could be politics, okay? I don't care whether you're Hindu or Christian or Muslim, whatever. You were taught certain things, okay? And people all of a sudden tell you that. It's like, okay, somebody always... Let me tell a story, about the Argentina story, about how the kids lost their own parents because they're adopted by the right-wing military leaders. Okay, I'll tell the story very briefly, okay? These revolutionaries or rebels, depending on which side you're on, their kids, okay, were adopted by the military officers of the Argentina government. And these are the military officers that actually killed their parents. Okay? They killed their parents, adopted the children. Okay? These children were brought up, okay, as children of these military officers. And then when the military government was toppled, okay, people were telling these children, your parents are actually the murderers of your real parents. What do you expect the kids? The kids will, boom, how dare you say that? Okay, they'll never believe that. Okay, so I have half an hour, 1 hour to convince somebody. How can I do that? I hope that the Chinese, when they hear me, that's the reason I stress on the sources and also the authoritativeness of each publication. And I simply hope that some of them will go and find out. And if they refuse to find out, there's something to do about it. Okay? Yes?
Thank you very much for your very interesting presentation. But sir, I was wondering about, if there is any other version of the same history, let's say in oral history or the subaltern history.
I'm sorry, say that once more, please.
The oral history,
yeah,
or subaltern history.
Yeah.
So is the perception the same or is it different? Because in the documentation, we all know that facts can be distorted.
Oh yeah, of course.
There is so much of coercion going on.
You're absolutely right. So I'm not even presenting facts. I'm not presenting facts. I'm presenting historical records. Then you can interpret the historical facts based on your own conscience. And
so how do we distinguish between truth and facts then, you see?
Okay.
How do we
cull out
the
truth? This is true with any topic, whether you're talking about Tibetan history, or even things like that. Is eating too much meat, having high cholesterol, good or bad for your body? This is an argument, I'm sure, even in India, it's very popular. In the United States, it's been raging on for years, okay? Should I eat more beef or less beef? Is cholesterol bad for my health, okay? And then today, it's like, is red meat good for my health, bad for my health, okay? You have people selling you all kinds of wonderful vitamin pills and all kinds of, I don't even know names of this, all kinds of health supplements, okay, that will, okay, what are you going to believe, okay? Okay, we have another one that is going on in the United States right now, vaccination. Okay, people say that if you vaccinate your children, you are doing something harmful to your children because it causes a lot of illnesses. Okay, would you believe it? Okay, I would think that I would believe in the respectable authorities. Okay, and in each field there are respectable authorities and there are quacks in every field, whether you're talking about medicine or history or whatever. Okay. Are these authorities always right? No. The cholesterol thing recently, okay, they reversed the judgment, right? They finally now tell people that it's not that too bad. It's not that bad to eat 3 eggs a day. It used to be that don't eat any eggs, okay? It will increase your cholesterol. Now they're saying that, it's safe if you eat 2 eggs a day, okay? And recently they came out with this thing about beef too, okay? So it's the same thing over here. And actually I'll address your issue in greater detail afterwards, okay? But even at this stage, what we're going to say is that these are what is considered as the most authoritative historical documents by the Chinese historians themselves. This is not a Tibetan topic. The Great Ming Unification Record is not a Tibetan document. It's a Chinese document where Tibet is really totally irrelevant. Remember, it's relegated to right there. Okay? And in these documents, okay, when they show something, the question is that, are they more believable than others? It's just like when you have a Harvard Medical School publishing a journal article that says, certain things are harmful, and then you have this person, the salesman, that says, no, actually, the drugs I sell you would be actually better, pay me so many rupees for a pill. Who are going to believe in? You'll be surprised how many people will choose to believe in the pill salesman. In the United States, they pay hundreds of dollars to pay for all these pills that are totally useless. Okay? Can you convince them? No. Okay? So I'm not saying that I can convince people. What I'm trying to remind the Chinese and the Indians and a whole bunch of other people is that these documents exist. Now, I'll actually go one step further, because over here I'm talking only about the imperial documents, which, of course, according to Chinese communists, are totally unacceptable because they are these imperial rulers that are dirty and useless and bad and blah. Remember the Cultural Revolution? The children of China were taught that during the Cultural Revolution is that those things are all bad, just like you say, okay? So later on, I'll talk about the scholastic ones, and then I'll talk about the populistic one, and look at how these populist documents, how they depict Tibet, okay? And then we're going to just say that during that time, what do all the publications say about Tibet during that time, okay? Again, that doesn't prove anything. You might say, well, but some of these publications that present a different view, they have just been lost. You see, I can only prove that something exists by showing you something. I can never prove that something doesn't exist. I can show you 100 books, okay, of different nature to show you that it shows that Tibet was never part of China. And then I can then simply claim that I don't think there exists one where it shows Tibet as being part of China. But you can retort by saying, you just didn't find it. I can't prove that something doesn't exist. But actually I can in this case, because I can always come by saying that if you can find one, it will be very, very convincing. But the Chinese, the PRC, has never produced one. Okay? The PRC, in all its propaganda, has never dared to claim that there's a map, a Ming Dynasty map or geography book that shows that Tibet was part of China. In contrast, you know there are two territorial, there are many of course, but the two most important territorial disputes involving the People's Republic of China. One is Tibet, the other one is the Senkaku Islands, okay, against the Japanese government. You know, it's called, in Chinese, it's called 钓鱼台, okay, 钓鱼列岛, okay. If you look at the Chinese, the PRC, I think the big difference, I want to stress once more, there's a big difference between PRC and Chinese, okay? There are two different things, okay? I mean, PRC and Chinese, they are two separate things. PRC history is one thing, Chinese history is one thing, okay? As you can see over here, you can already see that, okay? If you look at the PRC's approach to the Senkaku Island dispute, they always go back to the maps. They show you maps because the Chinese claim that they have maps to show that Senkaku Islands was depicted to be part of China. But then when they come to the Ming Dynasty issue of Tibet, they never dare to talk about the maps because they know that there's no such thing. So that's the way I can argue that I don't think there's such a counter proof, because if there's one, they would have produced it. But really, the final answer is in the next hour where I'll show you more.
Tibet is Tibet Autonomous Region, I suppose. When you say Tibet Autonomous Region,
yeah.
TAR. But if you take entire Tibet, cultural, linguistic, will the history will be different as you have projected?
I'm sorry. I don't quite understand your question. Linguistic tradition, you mean the linguistic link between the Han Chinese and the Tibetans?
Yes.
Well, I've actually shown you one example. It's the name the Tibetans call themselves, that cockroach or beetle or worm-looking letter, okay? No Chinese will understand a single letter of that, okay? That is actually no link in the most basic sort of, even in naming things, okay? I can't answer your question within a short period, but my book actually is devoted to that, okay? But this is what I can tell. I think the Tibetans will argue, and I'll agree with Tibetans, okay? There's actually very little commonality between, I shouldn't say that, okay? The more objective we say this is, the amount and level of commonality between the Tibetans and the Han Chinese is much, 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 much lower than the level of commonality between the Chinese and the Japanese. Okay? When the Japanese invaded China in 1937, okay, during the Second World War, the Japanese argument was exactly as today's PRC's argument. And that's, we are brothers. I'm here to help you. How dare you bring in those white foreigners like the Americans and the British, okay, to meddle with this, okay? We can cooperate and we can then make East Asia strong and then we can kick out these white devils, okay? The Chinese didn't take it that way at all. The Chinese are saying that, who the heck are you? You know, you murdered all my brothers and my friends and whatever, and now you want to tell me that you are my brothers? But as I've said, this is basically, you know, people like me, if you show me a Tibetan script, honestly, I don't know a single letter. Okay? I would know what the heck you're talking about. You show me a typical Japanese article, I can guess what is it about because I can recognize 40 to 50% of the words. So that's all I can say is that if you want to talk about cultural linkage, then let's talk about Austria and Germany and Switzerland and the Netherlands. Okay, you know about. Well, I mean, you all know about the Second World War history, about what the Hitler was saying about, you know, the Aryan race and so forth. Yeah.
I would like you to comment on the concept of expansionism throughout history, whether Ming, Yuan, or other one, and the continuing PRC concept. Because from what you have explained, you know, this is their territories, this is foreign entities, this is, I mean, some kind of a hegemony kind of a concept. Is that what I have understood from your?
No, actually what I've shown is the opposite, is that the Ming government was not expansionist at all. They very clearly state that what we control is the 13 provinces. And these other places are not our territory. They stated very clearly.
But the PRC, in their enthusiasm, unification or reunification or whatever concept they have taken, they have obviously adopted a political approach or a foreign policy which really threatens all the countries around the PRC as it exists now.
I have no comment and I will not comment because my topic is on history, not on what's happening. If you want to talk about what do you think of the PRC, I will plead ignorance, okay? I am just talking about what happened before 1949, okay? And I can tell you, okay, before 1949, the Ming Dynasty was not an expansionist regime. The Yuan Dynasty was very expansionist. They went all the way to near Vienna. Okay, they conquered, you know, the Middle Asia and then Poland and so forth. But those are the Mongolians. Okay, the Qing Dynasty, and I was showing the Qing Dynasty. They were very expansionist. They were nasty. Okay, they were cruel. But those are the Manchurians. Okay, the Han China. I'm being chauvinistic. Okay, I'm sure you see like this guy is trying to defend his own race. Okay, but really, if you look at the Ming Dynasty, what they're saying is that, hey, you know, I don't want you people to be my brothers. I don't think you're good enough, okay? Basically, they have a very superior attitude, okay? They're simply not interested in having these Tibetans or whatever as part of the country. Now, as for PRC, as I've already said, I only deal with history, okay? What do you think of the PRC, okay? I don't want to say anything, okay? PRC, the idea of communism comes from a Jewish person raised in Germany, okay? And that's a person, even though he's a Jewish person raised in Germany, his school of thought is sort of discarded by both Germany and Israel. Okay? You know who I'm talking about. Karl Marx, right? So that is the foundation of the Chinese Communist sort of ideology, okay? So what has that to do with China or Chinese culture? You know, it's up to you to think of it. I just think that, well, I mean, if you want to pick up the garbage of this person that was discredited by both Germany and Israel, which is sort of, you know...
I'm afraid I'll have to step in.
Yeah.
We can ask the questions later.
Yeah.
Now it is time to take a break.
Yeah.
And then we can return.
Yeah.
So just, as the chair of this session, Parliament's adjourn. So let us adjourn for 20 minutes and then we return.